short. My son one day will rise against your concrete backdrop, above your smoggy sky, and I'm gonna fly.
Okay, so water methanol injection. We are on a limited budget. The owner's willing to pay for anything he needs to, but we've already spent most of the money on the kit, so we're trying to save with what we can on the water methanol. It's obviously not something you want to cheap out on, right? You don't want to use something sub-quality that's going to affect, the safety of the vehicle. So everything has to be good, but it doesn't mean you can't get creative to try to save some money. So this is one of the ideas here. Water methanol tanks go from about $60 to $150 depending on the size of the tank. They're fine, there's no issues with them, and what you're paying for is the tank, but you're also paying for mounting brackets, and you're paying for a fitting that gets the water meth into the pump. I realized that over-the-counter coolers from like Walmart will have the possibility of doing an even better job. So you have a fitting on the end that's watertight already. It's designed to have a hose. They make adapters to NPT so I can get the fitting out into the pump. So that's good. They're insulated. So if you want to run like a cooler, like water, if you want to throw some ice in there, you can. And they should be pretty easy. I don't come with mounting brackets, but I have some ideas using the handles. All in all, I think this is a great choice. It was like $30 or $40, something like that. And I think it's going to do great. The pump, that's not something you can really screw around with. We got an AEM pump. I currently have it on a 3D printed bracket. And as you can see, there's some nubs. I tried to use super glue, which I assumed wasn't going to work. What I guess I wanted to know was how fast it would fail. And it was almost immediate. I had it for a couple days. Moving the cooler around and fell off. I'd never even put water in it or anything. So super glue's obviously out. The reason I even bothered to, besides wanting to see if it would work, is that there's no real good place to mount the bracket without drilling, unfortunately. And I really don't want to drill because I don't know what's on the inside or how it works. I'm assuming it's just two pieces with an air gap. If that's the case, then drilling shouldn't be a big deal. I'm going to drill a large pilot and then drop in two smaller holes and try to do some kind of just stud deal. So yeah, that's the plan for the cooler. That's the plan for the pump. The rest of the kit is pretty conventional. Push to connect fittings. I have an AEM nozzle. I'm going to run a 250cc nozzle tip to start to see what kind of cooling I can get with that. There is one special thing that I'm doing besides the cooler, and that is the Arduino. So I have always wanted to try to make my own controller for something simple like a meth controller, but I'm not a great coder. I understand the very, very, very basics, and that's about it. However, with ChatGPT or any of the AIs, you can just take your ideas, tell the machine, and it spits out the code. And so I tested it last night, and I'm going to go over some of the footage here, but I'm shocked. It worked really well. So I'm going to cut to some of that and give you an idea of what we're working on, and this will be kind of video one. I'm expecting this to be 2, 3 at the most. So here we go. Hello. Okay, so this is the controller for the water methanol injection kit. These are actually pretty readily available for a bunch of suppliers, and some of them have progressive rate controllers that can ramp up the water methanol pressure at the pump by varying the voltage. I don't really need that. I just needed something to turn on at a given vacuum pressure and turn off when the vacuum is increased or when you're closer to an idle situation. So to do that, I picked up an Arduino Uno, 3D printed a case for it, and I started by basically figuring out our map sensor. So this is a Honda stock, I guess it's like capable of seeing 9 pounds of boost, but ultimately I just needed it for the vacuum. So what I did was I took the map sensor, I hooked it up to a vacuum pump, and then I measured the different voltage readings at different vacuum levels. And then that tells me where the pump lives, or I'm sorry, where the map sensor will operate depending on what voltage is applied. So what I want is, I want the pump to come on somewhere around here. And the reason is because you want it to come on before you get into boost, because there's a latency. There's a time where the pump turns on, and just because of, you know, it has to pressurize, the map sensor has to see it, like everything has to catch up, and then it starts spraying. So you want to bring it in sooner than your target boost pressure. So I needed to map out the voltage, which I did. So 0, which is atmosphere or wide open throttle in any car, is 2.7. 5 psi is 4 volts, and negative 10 psi is 1.8. I took that, gave the values to ChatGPT. It spit out a bunch of code, given my basic voltages, and then I activated the serial monitor so I could watch it. And then I also added a status LED, so that way you know when the pump is on, because you really should keep track of your system, so that way you're not just boosting and the pump's not activating and nobody's happy. I have an ignition cut for the temperatures, so even if that happens, the car should be pretty safe. But ultimately, you still want to know. So this is designed to come on at about 2 volts, which is equivalent to, you know, you're starting to get closer to you're starting to get closer to wide open throttle. And then I have it turning off somewhere like 1.6, so when it snaps back to idle. And so if I did everything right, when it hits the requested, it sends the voltage from the map sensor to the Arduino sees it, and then turns on the pump, which is the output voltage, pin 13, which I then have hooked up to my meter for operation. But I do have the status LED activated, so if this works, the status LED should just come on as though the pump was running. So to give it an idea, right now we're sitting at a little under negative 10, you know, barely, almost an idle. Well, not really, you got a couple pounds to go before you get to idle, but like this is like a medium mild cruise, but the pump is not on at this thing. So let's say it's like somebody's trying to race, you stand on the gas pedal and boom, you go to wide open throttle, you know, in an NA application, of course, I could add boost. But already you can see the pump does then ground, so I have 0 resistance. It's your ohms. I have 0 resistance to the ground circuit, which means that if I have a ground side relay, the relay is turned on. And then if you see, the status LED turned on. So just as a quick test, if I start pumping up the vacuum, everything turns off. So as of right now, system's working. I'm gonna try to tidy this all up and put it in some kind of box that'll hold, and I think I'm gonna just stick it to the side of the cooler and run it as is for now. As you can see, I have a GM IAT sensor in here. I have an idea for doing a pre-cool circuit, so that if ambient temperatures, or basically inlet temperatures at the charge pipe, goes above a certain voltage, even if the pump, even if the map sensor is not under like a power, like if you're not in it, even if you're just cruising below the trigger, I want it to still come on and pre-cool the charge pipe. You got to be careful with that, because you don't want to pump your water when the car is at full idle. You could risk puddling and you could risk locking. It's not super likely, especially if you're running a small nozzle at like 250 cc's, but still, it's just good practice. So to combat that, when I eventually do turn on the IAT for the pre-cooling, what I'll do is I'll add another line of code, or I guess ChatGPT will add another line of code, so that it will only look at the IAT sensor and turn the pump on at a minimum or above a minimum volt vacuum. That way we don't risk any of the puddling, and there's enough velocity in the air charge to bring the water in and homogenize it into the mixture. So yeah, this is basically locked down for now. I'm gonna move on to final construction.